This is East Asia Tonight.
Good Friday evening, and we'll tell you what's tonight's top stories from East Asia. The final hearing for former South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol's insurrection trial is underway. The ousted leader could be facing life in prison or death. Now, China ruling out any outside interference on Taiwan after U.S. President Donald Trump said that he would be very unhappy if Chinese President Xi Jinping moves against the island. Also, Beijing reacting, or rather rejecting, disarmament talks with the U.S. and Russia as neither reasonable nor realistic, and insisting its growing nuclear force is strictly defensive. Now, a blockbuster debut for China's MiniMax. The deep-sea rival surges 109% in Hong Kong, a day after stellar debuts by 3 other tech startups, highlighting strong investor appetite for AI. Also on the bulletin, an economic revival, billions of dollars in the making. How Tokyo's push for a chip-making hub is transforming Japan's so-called Silicon Island. And the World Economic Forum says global cooperation is undergoing a major shift amid mounting tensions. We'll be speaking with President and CEO Borge Brende for insights on WEF's latest report and what a new world order could look like. Proceedings are underway for the final hearing in the insurrection trial of former South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol. Prosecutors are pushing for a sentence for the ousted leader today. Well, Yoon is on trial with 7 other defendants accused of helping execute his orders, and they include former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun and former National Police Agency Chief Cho Ji-ho. In South Korea, leading an insurrection is punishable by up to life in prison or death. Well, earlier today, more than a dozen of Yoon supporters gathered near the court to call for the release of the ousted leader. The insurrection case is the most serious of 7 criminal trials Yoon currently faces, while he's already looking at a possible 10-year jail term in a separate obstruction of justice case, with sentencing expected next Friday.
그리고 윤석열 대통령님을 지지한다, 내라는 무죄다, 이런 거를 이제 목소리를 꼭 내야 되는 시기라고 생각을 해서 재판관님들이 흔들리지 말라고 와서 목소리 내고 있습니다. 네.
Here's a look back at how all the events leading to this trial unfolded. It all started with his brief declaration of martial law on 3rd of December 2024, a move that he said was aimed at rooting out anti-state forces. The lawmakers unanimously rejected the measure, forcing Yoon to lift the decree just 6 hours later. And less than 2 weeks later, on 14th of December, Parliament voted to impeach him, leading to his suspension from office. And then in January 2025, Yoon surrendered to authorities after weeks of resistance, becoming the country's first sitting president ever arrested. Well, soon after that, Yoon was indicted on charges, including leading an insurrection, with his criminal trial underway soon after. Well, he was permanently removed from office when the Constitutional Court upheld the impeachment in April last year. A snap presidential election followed, which brought Democratic Party's Lee Jae-myung to power. Now, CNA senior correspondent Lim Yoon-suk joins us live now from Seoul. Yoon-suk, first up, perhaps you could remind our viewers, why is the trial taking so long?
Well, it is taking much longer than initially expected, but this is the final hearing in former President Yoon's insurrection trial, and several procedural steps must be completed before the prosecutors can make their recommendations. Now, it's also important to note that Mr. Yoon is not the only defendant, as you said. 7 others are standing trial as well, including the former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun. And because of the seriousness of the charges, with a possible penalty for leading that insurrection is either the death penalty or life imprisonment, the court has said that it would allow extensive time for each defendant to respond to the prosecution's arguments. Now, that process alone is taking hours, and according to local reports, former Defense Minister Kim His session alone lasted more than 6 hours, and former President Yoon is expected to deliver his final statement, also meaning that the proceedings are likely to continue for several more hours. Now, as just said, under South Korea's Criminal Act, the crime of acting as the ringleader of an insurrection carries no lesser sentence than death or life imprisonment. And that has fueled speculation here in South Korea as to what sentence prosecutors will be seeking. Now, the main opposition party has said both Mr. Yoon and former President Kim and former Minister Kim should face penalties similar to those imposed on former Presidents Chun Doo-hwan and Roh Tae-woo, who were convicted on similar charges in the 1990s. Let's hear what the ruling party had to say.
저는 전두환과 노태우처럼 못지않는 죄를 지은 윤석열과 김용현 등에 대해서 전두환, 노태우와 같은 형량이 부여될 것이라 믿고 있습니다.
Now, local reports here saying that the verdict in this insurrection case is expected around mid to late February, so we'll have to wait till then to know, what the final verdict will be.
So Yoon is the first sitting president ever arrested, but is he also the first time in South Korea that a former president is facing these insurrection charges?
No, as we just heard, he is not. Former Presidents Chun Doo-hwan and Roh Tae-woo also faced insurrection-related charges here in South Korea. In fact, very interestingly, they were tried in the same courtroom where former President Yoon's hearing is taking place now. Now, both former President Chun and Mr. No, they were prosecuted for their military roles in this military coup in 1979 and then the suppression of this Gwangju uprising in 1980, which resulted in the death of many civilians. Now, Mr. Chun seized power in 1980, but it was only after he left office that he was brought to trial. And so in 1996, the Seoul High Court convicted Mr. Chun on multiple courts, including treason and insurrection, the charges that Mr. Yoon faces right now, and he was sentenced to death. Now, Roh Tae-woo, who had participated in this takeover while he was the senior general in the military, though he later became president, was sentenced to life imprisonment. Now, the Supreme Court later upheld these convictions, though the sentences were never carried out because in December 1997, then President Kim Young-sam pardoned both of them. So while Mr. Yoon's case is different, in a way, because there was no bloodshed during his 6-hour martial law attempt last December, many here in South Korea feel that his punishment still has to be severe enough to ensure that no future leader attempts to declare martial law here in South Korea.
Many thanks for that report. CNA senior correspondent Lim Yoon-suk in Seoul. Now, China says that it will not allow any external interference on the Taiwan issue after Donald Trump said that he would be very unhappy if Chinese President Xi Jinping makes a move against the island.
台湾是中国领土不可分割的一部分，台湾问题纯属中国内政，解决台湾问题是中国人自己的事，不容外部干涉。
Mr. Trump, in an interview with the New York Times, shrugged off a question on whether his actions in Venezuela might provide a precedent on Taiwan, saying that Mr. Xi wouldn't attack the island while he is in power. The U.S. leader says what the Chinese president decides to do is, quote, up to him, but said he would be very unhappy if China moves against Taiwan. While Washington has no formal ties with the island, it is committed to supplying Taipei with weapons, an issue Beijing has consistently opposed. Well, separately, China says it's not, quote, reasonable nor realistic for it to join nuclear disarmament talks with the U.S. and Russia. Well, that's in response to comments by Mr. Trump in the same New York Times interview that Beijing should be roped into any future arms control deal, as China has the world's fastest growing strategic nuclear force. Well, the Chinese embassy in Washington says that China keeps its nuclear strength at the minimum required level, while never engaging in an arms race. Beijing spurned a previous attempt by Mr. Trump a year ago to join an arms control treaty aimed at curbing the deployment of strategic nuclear weapons. One such pact, the 2010 New START nuclear accord between the U.S. and Russia, is set to expire in less than a month. The American leader said that he would allow that treaty to lapse, saying both sides will just come up with a better agreement. Foreign Minister Wang Yi is headed to Tanzania as part of his four-country trip to Africa to expand Beijing's long-running relationship with the continent. Well, this will be his third stop after Somalia and Ethiopia. Isaac Lukondo files this report for CNA from Dar es Salaam.
Africa is important to China. It has been the first overseas destination annually for China's foreign ministers for the past 36 years. As China celebrates the 70th anniversary of diplomatic relations with Africa this year, analysts say ties appear to be strong. In Tanzania, home to at least 30,000 Chinese residents, relations between the two countries have remained close for more than 6 decades. Bilateral trade has been expanding, rising to $8.8 billion in 2024 compared to just over $2 billion in 2020. China, an early development partner to Tanzania, is now looking to strengthen those ties further, while also capitalizing on investments made more than 5 decades ago. Analysts say the recent signing of a $1.4 billion deal with China to revitalize the 50-year-old Tanzania-Zambia railway is expected to provide Beijing with crucial access to Zambia's vast copper reserves. China has been Africa's largest trading partner for the last 16 years. Bilateral trade hit a high of just under $300 billion in 2024 and expanded even further to surpass $314 billion in the first 11 months of last year. China says it hopes to deepen mutual political trust with what it calls its strategic partners in Africa, while also securing additional shipping routes and resource supplying lines. Somalia, Ethiopia, Tanzania and Lesotho are among the 53 African nations participating in China's Belt and Road Initiative, a massive investment and infrastructure strategy aimed at improving global connectivity and trade. With more African nations now seeking investment and trade rather than loan-based debt, the initiative continues to gain ground on the continent. The result has been expanded infrastructure, development for Africa, and increased trade routes, access to resources, and strategic influence for China. However, it hasn't been smooth sailing for China. There have been some concerns over the viability of certain Chinese projects and debt burdens. It also faces competition from Russia and India, who are also vying for influence in the continent. The final stop on the tour will be Lesotho, where China is expected to offer the country affected by high US tariffs preferential access to its $19 trillion economy.
A time now for a short break, but coming up next at East Asia tonight, China's auto market loses momentum in 2025 with a weak domestic sales offset by stronger than expected exports.
From vibrant cities to ancient empires, journey across Asia's most captivating landscapes and the stories they hold. This January on CNA. Discover how the new generation is transforming life after dark. From drone-lit skylines to immersive cultural parks.
就我会觉得价值不一定是你要产出东西，有可能是你给了别人一些快乐。
Meet the innovators powering China's night boom. In Asian communities, salt is a source of a rich tapestry of artisanal and innovative culinary craft and production. Explore the ingenuity and traditions that elevate this everyday mineral into a cultural treasure in Salt of the Earth. And travel back in time with Peter Lee.
Some years ago, this place was considered too dangerous even for tourists.
To unravel the secrets behind Asia's ancient kingdoms and the legacies that shape the region's identity in The Mark of Empire, Kingdoms of the Sea. This January on CNA. Saturday on Japan Hour. Cycle around Shimanami, a small town where true hospitality awaits. Not only do the locals offer you free gifts, they will even cook it for you.
It's really, really good.
While you enjoy the beautiful views of this small town. Japan Hour, Saturday on CNA.
Japan Hour is brought to you by Sumitomo Corporation. MUFG, committed to empowering a brighter future. Zip Air, no fuel surcharge from 216 Singapore dollars. And IHI.
The CNA Summit 2026. Today's leaders face converging pressures, shifting geopolitics and capital flows. digital and AI acceleration, and rising calls for inclusive growth. How do leaders turn capital into viable projects and sustain execution across Indonesia's and the regional markets? The CNA Summit 2026, coming soon in February. Organised by MediaCorp. Main partner, Singtel. Hello Possibilities.
Hello again. You're watching East Asia Tonight, and it is now time for business news with none other than Olivia Marzuki. And Olivia, it looks like it's been a real busy start of the first week of the year at least. A couple of stellar IPOs in Hong Kong, supercharging China's AI ambitions. Tell us more about that.
That's right, I'll tell you. So basically, the second IPO for Chinese AI firm MiniMax saw an overwhelming debut. It is signaling investor enthusiasm spreading beyond hardware to software. Its shares soaring 109% in Hong Kong in a sign that strong investor demand is rewarding the country's rapidly developing AI sector. The stock was priced at 165 Hong Kong dollar a piece in an upsize offering, with retail investors subscribing to more than 1,830 times the shares available. MiniMax raked in about $620 million from that IPO, selling more than 29 million shares at the top end of its targeted price range. Founded in early 2022, the Shanghai-based firm has its roots in gaming. Backed by Alibaba Group and Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund, MiniMax is among the first of China's post-ChatGPT generative AI firms to go public. It joins a wave of Chinese AI and chip firms sprinting to list in Hong Kong. Many have held above offer prices post-debut, reflecting solid investor demand and aligning with Beijing's push for homegrown tech resilience. And this is as U.S. export curbs continue to squeeze the sector. Meantime, Triple AI, MiniMax's Beijing-based peer, jumping 20% on its second trading day after its own $558 million initial public offering. South Korea's government is foreseeing a stronger economic growth for 2026, better than the country's central bank's estimates. South Korea's finance ministry estimates that the country will grow 2% this year compared to the Bank of Korea's 1.8% projection. The more confident outlook is driven by stronger domestic spending, strong export numbers, and opening up South Korea's currency and stock market to foreign investors. A central pillar to that optimism is the sweeping overhaul of foreign exchange market access. The government says it will fully extend onshore FX trading to a 24-hour system from July, and that would replace the current structure that closes in the early hours of the morning. It is expected to improve links with overseas trading hubs and electronic currency platforms. South Korea have previously been reluctant to loosen currency trading rules after foreign investment flew out of the country during the 1997 Asian financial crisis. China's car sales in 2025 slowed to their weakest pace in 3 years, while exports of made-in-China cars beat estimates. And that's as automakers stepped up overseas expansion to offset a sluggish domestic market. For the month of December, sales dropped 14.5% from a year earlier to 2.28 million units. That is worse from an 8.5% decline in November, and the biggest fall since February 2024. For the full year, sales growth was recorded at around 4%, slowing from 5.3% in 2024. Domestic demand faded in the last quarter as many cities and provinces reduced or suspended government subsidies for auto trade-ins due to a funding shortage. And that intensified an already cutthroat competition in the world's largest market. Automakers including Chang'an, FAW, Li Auto, and NIO failed to meet their sales target. BYD posted its weakest sales growth in 5 years. It narrowly met its slashed sales target of 4.6 million vehicles. But exports remain pretty resilient, with NEV shipments exceeding 86% on year. Chinese market regulators are urging Nestlé to swiftly recall baby formula on the mainland over possible contamination worries. There are concerns that baby formula products shipped to Asia, Europe, and the Americas might have been contaminated with cerulite, which can cause vomiting. Within Asia, baby formula recalls have also affected markets in Hong Kong, Australia, and New Zealand. Nestlé's China website stated that it is voluntarily recalling 41 batches of baby formula imported from Europe and sold in China. No reports of illnesses have been linked to the products yet in China or the rest of the globe. While the final assessment on the cost for the global recall has not been tallied, Nestlé says they do not expect a significant financial loss, as the affected batches only account for less than 0.5% of their annual group sales. Nestlé shares looking a little lower, and it traded down and trading at 74.36. Get ready to pay more for your next phone or laptop. Prices of consumer electronics are set to rise this year as AI is eating up the global supply of memory chips. Analysts at Morgan Stanley warn that hardware prices will jump significantly in the first half of 2026. And that's because tech giants like Google, Amazon, and Meta scramble to build massive AI data centers. Huge amounts of high-end memory are needed to power them. Now, that's leaving fewer chip supplies for smartphones and PCs and pushing up costs for everyone else. Experts say some brands like Apple may be able to keep prices stable thanks to long-term supply deals. But for most end users, higher prices of electronic goods are on the horizon. CEO of British chipmaker ARM, Rene Haas, says it is the most severe memory shortage he's seen in 2 decades. Samsung's TM Raw describes it as unprecedented and will inevitably hit consumers. Japan has designated semiconductors as a strategic growth sector for prioritized investment. It is pumping in billions of dollars to support chip-making hubs such as the southern Kumamoto prefecture, home to Taiwanese tech titan TSMC's manufacturing plant. CNA's senior correspondent Michio Ishida finds out how semiconductors are rebooting the local economy.
The rush hour commute in Kikuyo town in Kumamoto prefecture is an unusual sight in rural Japan. Located in Kyushu, sometimes called Japan's Silicon Island for its history as a chip-making hub, the area is undergoing a transformation as Japan embarks on a drive to revive its once dominant semiconductor industry. Taiwan's TSMC opened its factory here in Kumamoto in February 2024 under the name Japan Advanced Semiconductor Manufacturing, run together by Sony Semiconductor Solutions, Denso, and Toyota. And the construction of a second factory is underway. The Japanese government is providing substantial funding worth billions of dollars. The overall investment in the plant, totaling more than $20 billion, is the biggest the prefecture ever received, according to Kumamoto's governor. And the impact is visible nearly 2 years on.
雇用がもう数千人規模で増えたということもとてももともとのどかな田舎町とまだ十分にですね道路とかのインフラ整備が追いつかない中でちょっと工場ができてしまったので周辺のちょっと道路が渋滞してたりとか課題が多ございます。
Mr. Kimura says that the plant has set off a semiconductor boom, attracting some 70 firms and creating more than 6,000 jobs. New entrants include this training center. Nisso Technical Center Kumamoto offers a 2-month program for new hires and those seeking to join the sector, teaching basic skills in semiconductor manufacturing. It's even set up its own mock facility, requiring protective gear and sanitization as in real factories, and equipped with machines used in actual production. Opening just 2 months after TSMC, it says it saw an opportunity to fill demand for trained workers here.
TSMC さんもそうですけど、ソニーさんとか、 半導体メーカーが集積してきてますので、そういったところのを狙ってこっちに立ち上げたという形です。特に、中間層、新人とベテラン組の間の組が足りなくて。
Shogo Yoshioka left the shipping industry and signed up for a chance to switch to semiconductors.
お客様に満足してもらえるような商品を作る、メイドインジャパンの製品をしっかり自分も作る。
As job prospects draw more workers to Kumamoto, it's also driving demand for other services such as schools.
TSMC came to Kumamoto, so we actually had to open up the high school faster than we had originally planned. We opened grade 7, 8, and 9 in 2023.
Kumamoto International School started as a preschool in 2003.
What about cold? Present. Rabbit.
Today, it has more than 300 students and 55 staff, with language classes in Japanese, English, and Mandarin for both native and non-native speakers.
The plan is to expand the building and to expand the number of students that we could admit.
As businesses move in, cost of living in the region is rising, with commercial land prices in Kikuyo recording nearly a 31% hike last year, according to government data. But the town's coffers are also growing, with an estimated 30% jump in property tax revenue for fiscal year 2025. The drive to turn Kumamoto into the epicenter of Japan's chip renaissance is unabated. Japan now holds about 10% of the market share in the global semiconductor industry, a far cry from half at its peak in 1988.
先端の半導体を作る、これをですね使った産業っていうのがまだ日本国内、いや世界全体見てもあんまりないんですね。やはりこれからの未来の新しい産業づくり、ここに熊本がエントリーしたい。
TSMC has started construction of its second plant, though local media say work is being paused as it's considering design changes. Kumamoto hopes to attract TSMC to build a third plant here. Michio Ishida, CNA, Kumamoto, Japan.
So that's all I have in business for you, Oteli. Happy Friday.
And happy weekend. Thanks very much for that report. Olivia, on that note, we are going to zip out for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, the WEF report says a shift in global cooperation is underway. And World Economic Forum President and CEO Borge Brende will join us to share his insights when we come back.
It's a David versus Goliath battle.
Ladies and gentlemen, what a rally we are witnessing today.
On courts usually dominated by the colonial elite, one man shifted the balance.
He was not just a tennis pioneer, he was a sporting pioneer.
A late bloomer who only learned the sport at 21. An underdog who changed history.
To have a racket named after you, it would be like rackets being named after Nadal or Federer.
Then came war.
My grandpa was rounded up by the Japanese.
Thousands never came home. But he did. No one knows why.
I have so many questions.
Who was this champion who filled headlines and who remains such a mystery today? Legend in a Day, 10th January, Saturday on CNA.
Biodiversity is booming, which is inviting for some local foragers and farmers who embrace edible wildlife.
We're the largest organic banana grower in Singapore.
This is
wow.
jam?
Amazing.
Yeah.
So the mulberries are from the garden?
No, that's delicious.
Singapore is ramping up conservation efforts locally and across the region.
I really do love reptiles and finding out about them, so I really love my job.
Building must relate to the lives of the people.
目前还是一直要创新一些新的东西，我也不希望是人家把我看作是80岁的人。
There are those who dare to be different, who have made their mark in Singapore and beyond.
You have such big dreams, you want to change the world with your art.
Obviously, every fighter wants to win, so all you can do is to prepare yourself to win.
This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. The final hearing for former South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol's insurrection trial is underway. The ousted leader could be facing a life in prison or death. Local media say a verdict could be delivered next month. And China rules out any outside interference on Taiwan after U.S. President Donald Trump said that he would be very unhappy if Chinese President Xi Jinping moves against the island. And Beijing also rejecting disarmament talks with the US and Russia, calling it neither reasonable nor realistic. It insists its growing nuclear force is strictly defensive. Now, a World Economic Forum report says global cooperation is staying resilient despite geopolitical tensions, trade barriers, and growing fragmentation. Well, the yearly report tracks how well countries are working together in areas like trade, tech, health, and climate to enhance peace and security. Well, it says that global cooperation is evolving, not retreating. Well, among its key findings, smaller coalitions becoming more instrumental for global peace with a decline in multilateral cooperation. Well, peace and security cooperation took the biggest hit, while health and trade mostly flatlined. But bright spots in climate, technology as cooperation surged despite emerging challenges. Well, the report highlights the need for leaders to focus on rebuilding more effective dialogue with partners to advance shared interests in the future. So for more on this, Borge Brande joins us live from Geneva. He is the president and CEO of the World Economic Forum, overseeing the report. Well, thanks, Borge, for joining us this evening. First up, of course, we all know that we are navigating one of the most complex geopolitical landscapes in decades. For instance, we've got Trump's move in Venezuela. So, Borge, I'm curious to know, what does the new world order look like in this climate?
It's definitely different from the world order we had post the Cold War, 1989. It is more competitive, and nations are more focused on their national interests. We thought we were seeing a more multipolar world, but we're also seeing now tendencies of big nations having their interest spheres. So what is emerging is a different way of collaboration. It is not as much as in the past multilateral, where all nations are in the same room and everyone have to agree. Is going to be more bespoke, is also more plurilateral in the sense that there are, as you mentioned in the intro, nations coming together in coalition of willing, saying, oh, we want to do a trade deal on, for example, digital trade, and the 70 nations come together and they don't wait for everyone to agree, but they just move. And then I think we're also seeing more friend-shoring, that countries are trading more with countries that then portray as their friends.
So picking up from what you're saying about multilateralism versus smaller coalitions, the U.S., for instance, they're pulling back from even more international bodies, as what we've reported. Does that actually accelerate the shift, and who actually gets left out?
So, as I said, it is not the end of international cooperation, but it is a different cooperation. And the backdrop geopolitically is probably the most complex we have had since 1945. But the paradox, though, is that even with a lot of geopolitical turmoil and uncertainty, the highest tariff we're faced with now is uncertainty. But even in such a context, we do see that the global growth is very resilient. We expect 3.2% global growth this year, and we see huge investments in the new technologies. So what we have to make sure is that there are no further escalations geopolitically. So we see major wars on top of what we're already struggling with, because that can kill growth. But I would say that at the beginning of the new year, we see growth in trade. We also see a lot of investment. So the economic situation is not as difficult as we expected maybe a year ago.
And I can clearly see that you're the sort of guy, the glass is always half full. But when we talk about certain strains showing up in alliances, so take, the whole US, Greenland, Denmark tension, for instance. I mean, there are talks that are going on. But when certain leaders are very insistent on having their way, how does cooperation then evolve? And how do countries progress from that?
I think the world is now developing the necessary resilience to deal with new realities. This is a different reality than we had in the past, that's for sure. But what we have to avoid is major escalations between the big players like China and the US. It looked much more difficult just a few months ago. And now we know that President Trump is planning a state visit to China in April. We saw that they both had so-called cards on their hand, like China have rare earth, they also have batteries that the US really rely on. But then China also saw that the Americans do have chips, microchips, semiconductors through NVIDIA and other companies that they do rely on. So the thing is that we're very integrated after so many years of globalization. So hopefully, with the new technologies that will possibly lead to increased productivity, also increased investments and growth, we can maybe see a decade not of sluggish growth that we feared like a year ago, like repeating the 1970s with slow growth. We might even see decades of substantial growth and prosperity if we avoid, as I said, wars and conflicts. And that is the most worrying piece of the global collaboration barometer that we just presented, that on peace and reconciliation, it is not looking so good. There are too many armed conflicts, there are too many people displaced in the world, and one needs to find ways of working together also in these areas and not only on the economic side.
So when companies here are watching, tariff risks, renewed trade weaponization, what do businesses now have to get used to? What do you consider that as a baseline? And how do you operate when the rules keep changing?
What we have seen is that trade is like water. So when there are impasses or barriers, it seems like it just finds its way. That is a surprise. We are expecting trade now growing almost as much as the global growth this year. And at a certain point, we were even expecting, for example, manufactured goods to contract. It's not. It's no growing. But it's not growing as in the past because trade was the engine of growth. Grew like 2-3 times the global growth. What we're seeing now is that the new technologies are a major growth factor. Like in the US in the third quarter last year, you saw like growth close to 4.5%. That is almost unheard of in a developed economy. So let's hope that the new technologies will increase growth. It will also, we see it also has huge impact on the trade agenda in the sense that what is now exponentially growing when it comes to trade is services and digital trade, while traditional manufactured goods like TVs and cars and all this is not growing as in the past.
Right, and just looking ahead a little bit, the World Economic Forum in Davos happening in about in a week and a half. It's themed Spirit of Dialogue, and there are reports that President Trump will be there. Are you worried that certain issues of what's happening around the world is going to overshadow this event? And I guess what would you count as a successful outcome?
It's true that our theme is the spirit of dialogue, and dialogue is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Any cooperation starts with having the right people in the room and looking at where there's overlap in their interest. I think leaders coming to Davos will find out that, for example, future pandemics, you cannot treat that as one country. It's a global issue, global challenge where you have to find global solutions. So we expect historic participation, both on the business side, but also on the public figure side in Davos. And as long as we have the right people in the room and they're willing to have a dialogue, we think we can move the world forward. So, as you said, I'm more of a glass half full guy than the glass half empty guy.
Well, you'll have your work cut out for you in Davos, I'm sure of that. But for now, I'm going to leave you to enjoy your lunch. You're in Geneva. Well, thank you so much for your time and thoughts. Really appreciate that, Borge Brende, President and CEO of the World Economic Forum. Well, turning our attention to Southeast Asia now, anti-piracy watchdog ReCap says that the Straits of Malacca in Singapore continue to be an area of concern. It reported a record number of sea robberies last year, highlighting the challenges that exist for shipping companies in one of the world's busiest maritime corridors.
The Straits of Malacca and Singapore increasingly crowded, but ever more vital. The vessels plying these waters carry about 60% of global maritime trade, but their importance to commerce no less a deterrent to piracy. A total of 108 incidents were reported in 2025. That's 74% higher than the previous year. Industry observers say worsening socio-economic conditions could have contributed.
So a lot of these robbery cases, they are opportunistic in nature, and it's driven by socio-economic conditions. So it's about people losing jobs due to global changes, technology, or even climate. So we are talking about farmers, fishermen who have lost their jobs, and some of them are turning to this what we call avenues just to get by.
By the numbers alone, there is plenty of opportunity. More than 90,000 vessels annually and roughly one-third of the world's oil supply pass through the narrow waterway, which lies between Singapore, Malaysia and Indonesia. Most cases of piracy in 2025 took place in the congested Phillip Channel between Singapore and Indonesia's Riau Islands, which requires some tricky navigating.
Merchant vessel must slow down when they take a 90 degrees turn, and slow-moving vessel is a very, very convenient target for the perpetrators to board.
Analysts say perpetrators are typically low-level, opportunistic criminals, often operating from remote Indonesian islands.
The modus operandi has been to board the vessels, usually in the hours of darkness, typically between 2 and 6 a.m. Historically, they would target vessels that were easy to board, so those with a low freeboard, i.e. where the deck is closer to the water.
These people involved in this petty thefts, they like to carry out their act, steal things without being detected. The modus operandi reveals that the moment their presence is detected by the crew, or there is an alarm by crew, they abandon the attack and they go away.
In nearly half the cases, nothing was stolen. When thefts occurred, items taken included engine spares, scrap metal and ship stores.
More recently, it has been targeted engine spares and other tools, machinery that can be lifted from the vessels and taken to their bases, but presumably to be on-sold.
What we learned is that there is a demand for this engine room spare in a parallel market.
ReCap says most incidents were non-violent, with ship crew left unharmed. Nonetheless, they pose a safety risk.
They're happening in the restricted waters of a busy shipping lane. And incidents like, even though of a petty theft, they are unwarranted distraction for the safe navigation of the ship. It can lead to accident.
However, observers note the incidents remain a small fraction of overall traffic.
You need to look at the sheer volume of vessels that are transiting the Straits every single day, and it's still a very tiny proportion of those ships. So in terms of a macro level view, I don't think that there is a particular cause for concern.
ReCap says 87% of incidents occurred in the first 7 months of 2025, with the numbers falling sharply after arrests made by Indonesian authorities in July and August.
Late last year, among our members' community, one particular member, apart from informing the sea enforcement agencies, they took the additional step of reaching out to one of the island land enforcement agency. And combined with the high-resolution CCTV footage, the enforcement agency was able to take a new level of action, and that made it more impactful.
Despite the positive momentum, the shipping industry remains cautious, as experts stress the need for continued vigilance.
We have seen in the past that after there has been a number of arrests, there is a quiet period, and then over a period of time, those attacks will build up again. I think with greater technology, use of drones, imaging, satellites, coordination between the three coastal states, that will be the key to keeping these piracy incidents at a low level, or under control, I should say.
Sustained collaboration between merchant shipping, the authorities and enforcement agencies, continue that information exchange, sustain that vigilance. I think this is really key in keeping this in check.
Across Asia, piracy and sea robbery incidents rose by 23% last year, though overall severity declined. None were classified under the most serious category, involving weapons and crew injuries, compared with 2 such cases in 2024. No crew abductions were reported in the Sulu Celebes seas for the 5th consecutive year, with Philippine authorities saying the threat level remains low. This follows trilateral patrols by Indonesia, Malaysia and the Philippines, together with sustained military operations that dismantled the Abu Sayyaf Group, a regional terror organization.
Coming up on East Asia tonight, K-culture increasingly shaping the way we speak as more Korean words are added to the Oxford English Dictionary for a 2nd straight year.
I've been collecting for the past 30 years. They're not just artifacts to me, but they represent the very thing that I collect for, my blood and energy.
We live in a time where when something's broken, we don't fix it, we replace it. Back then, old books were made to last. They were made for posterity.
Increasingly, scam calls have gone from this to this, and now this.
Scam calls are actually coming from overseas using local SIM cards.
How are scammers getting hold of our SIM cards?
400 SIM cards can be slotted into the SIM box to automate their call center operations.
What really goes on behind these local numbers you are getting? Talking Points, Sunday on CNA.
Gusto ko po maging sikat na boksingero para matulungan ko yung pamilya pamahod.
5 talented young Asians with big dreams.
ក្តីស្រមៃរបស់ខ្ញុំចង់ក្លាយជាវិស្វករម្នាក់ហើយក៏ចង់ក្លាយជាសិល្បករជាតិម្នាក់ដែលសម្ដែងនៅក្នុងប្រទេសកម្ពុជាផងដែរ
मुझे ये चाहिए कि जब वो बोले कि आपके जैसा रैप करना चाहिए और भी लड़के
Representing Singapore means quite a lot to me because it has been a dream since I was a little kid.
Chị thì chị nhìn tranh của Long không dưới cái góc độ là Long bị tự kỷ hay gì, mà đấy là một người có tài.
Will they succeed? Limitless Season 2, Tuesdays on CNA.
Now, in case you didn't already know, more Korean words have been added to the Oxford English Dictionary, highlighting the expanding global influence of Korean culture and language. Well, who better to tell us than Grace Shin, here to introduce what they are and also unpack the meaning behind each and every one of them. Grace?
That's right, Oteli. So a total of 8 Korean words were newly added this year. And what's interesting is that these terms aren't niche or obscure. So I'm going to be walking you through each and every one of them. Many of them describe everyday life in Korea, food, social relationships, housing, and even how people relax. So let's start with one many people around the world already know: That's ramen. Instant noodles made from dried noodles and seasoning cooked in hot water. On the surface, it sounds simple, but culturally, ramen is much more than fast food. In Korea, it's tied to late nights, convenience stores, shared meals, and even emotional comfort. And it shows up constantly in dramas and films, often symbolizing loneliness, survival, or small moments of happiness. Its spelling also matters because this time it's not Japanese ramen, it's ramyeon. Then there's haenyeo. Now, these are female free divers who harvest seafood, most famously on the popular resort island of Jeju. What makes this word culturally significant is that haenyeo represents a rare matriarchal tradition. Historically, they were the main breadwinners while men stayed home to care for children. And today, many haenyeo are elderly. Their culture is fading. The word entering the dictionary reflects growing global awareness helped by documentaries and dramas that brought their story to international audiences. Next up, bingsu, a shaved ice dessert topped with ingredients like fruit, red beans, or condensed milk. Traditionally, it was simple and seasonal, and today bingsu has evolved into a premium dessert with elaborate presentations and luxury ingredients. We also have Korean barbecue. Now, this refers to thinly sliced meat grilled at the table, and what makes it culturally distinctive is not just the food, but the experience. Korean barbecue is all about social, it's interactive, it involves sharing, cooking together, and eating at the same pace. And that communal aspect is a big reason it has translated well overseas. And 찜질방, often described simply as a bathhouse, but that barely scratches the surface. A 찜질방 is a public space where people bathe, sleep, eat, watch TV, and even work overnight. Families go together, couples go together, and it's one of the few truly communal spaces left in modern Korean life. And the word entering the dictionary reflects curiosity about Korean ways of resting and socializing, not just consuming entertainment. And the three remaining words move beyond food and leisure and into social structure. 선배, for instance, refers to a senior by age or experience, a relationship built on guidance, respect, and obligation, something English doesn't quite capture. And 아줌마, a term for a middle-aged woman, often used affectionately or even critically, but closely tied to resilience in everyday Korean life.
So all these words, Grace, worthy to enter the Oxford English Dictionary, but did any of this year's words actually strike you as particularly interesting?
I think two words really stood out to me. The first one being ramyeon, because personally, it's like a favorite staple that I go to. And also, it was interesting to note how completely this ordinary dish became something very globally recognized without losing its Korean identity. If I give you some stats, last year alone, K-ramyeon exports hit record highs, and ramyeon kept showing up in viral spice challenges and in pop culture. For instance, we saw Nongshim, one of the largest instant noodle creators in South Korea, partner with Netflix on the drama series K-pop Demon Hunters. And if you recall, that was Netflix's most watched title last year, accumulating more than 236 million views. And that collab turned ramyeon into part of global storytelling and fandom, which really underlines how far it's traveled. People look at the series, they see the ramyeon, they go to amusement parks with the collab, and they want to try it out. And 아줌마 stood out for a different reason. Now, as I mentioned before, it is culturally quite a sensitive word, tied closely to age and gender in Korea. It's sort of equivalent to the English word auntie. Now, depending on context, though, it can be affectionate, teasing, or critical. But for a term with that much social nuance to enter a global dictionary, for me, showed how deeply Korean society, not just food or entertainment, is now being observed and understood.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised bingsu kind of got in there as well. But in a nutshell, how do you think this year's list of words compared to previous years?
Well, I believe that earlier editions lean towards more of food and pop trends, and that's obviously because of the popularity of K-dramas, K-pop stars eating them or showing them on their live streams. And last year alone, 7 words including 달고나 from Squid Games, and 막내, which refers to the youngest sibling, and 떡볶이, which is spicy rice cake snacks, were added, making this the second year in a row for Korean cultural terms. And in 2021, as many as 26 Korean words were included, which includes 대박, which means, wow, you're doing good, and 오빠, which means like an older male figure. Now, this year goes deeper into how Koreans live, work, and relate to one another, and that matters because the Oxford English Dictionary's Korean consultant actually pointed this out, saying that once a word enters the OED, it's never removed, even if it's not being used. So you can tell the significance there. And these words become part of the historical record of English, a global language. And this consultant stressed that for Korean culture to have long-term influence, it needs to be documented and studied in English, hence beyond a dictionary as prestigious as the Oxford English Dictionary. So this year, I think the words aren't just about popularity. It's actually about Korean culture weaving a permanent mark on global language and if not even culture.
I know that's very, very interesting. And thanks for sharing with us, Grace. Look forward to the new words next year.
Yes, me too.
Or this year, rather.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, it's time to wrap up the Friday's edition of East Asia Tonight. I hope you've enjoyed our bulletin. And don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Thanks for watching.